Welcome to Coffee with Joe for December 31st, 2009. It's the last
Uh,
day of the year, Joe.
the last day of the decade,
The last
Pete.
day of the decade.
Yeah.
There's always some shenanigans that go on the day before Christmas.
Yes.
That was
So
the day that the Federal Reserve Act was passed in 1913 was the day before Christmas. We didn't have anything that big happen the day before Christmas. This year, we did have Tim Geithner on NPR telling us that we didn't need to worry about this being a double dip recession, that they had the tools that they needed to keep this economy in recovery is the frame that we have right now. And yet, what happened on Christmas Eve this year? Congress raised the debt limit yet again. Now, let's just review some numbers here, Joe. The total national debt is about $12 trillion right now. We just crossed the 12 trillion mark this fall, and there was talk that they were going to raise the debt limit $2 trillion, Joe, on the day before Christmas. That did not happen. They only raised it 200 billion, but the theory behind them raising the 2 trillion all at once was that then they wouldn't have to raise the debt limit again before the election in the fall. That's interesting enough right there, Joe, that they're thinking that we're going to go 2 trillion. We're at 12 trillion right now. We're going to add 2 trillion in less than a year, Joe? Well,
yeah,
they didn't fully admit that because they only took, I guess the Republicans blocked that happening all at once. They want this to come up again and again. They increased the debt limit by a paltry $200 billion, Joe. Now, if they don't raise the debt limit, the government shuts down, I guess, right?
in theory, the government does shut down, Pete, because for a couple of reasons. First of all, because the government is not aware that it has the power to print money. Um, and when I say print money, I use the term very loosely. I don't necessarily mean running the printing presses so much as how does government create money? It creates money by basically crediting bank accounts. That's what it does. When the government makes payments and credits bank accounts, it's creating money. The question on the other side is the revenues. Where do they getting the money from? So the fact that the government is forced to borrow is the fallacy of the day, Pete. Okay. Of course, what we advocate is that there is no need for the government to borrow money. The government can create the money by virtue of its power, its sovereign power of the people of the United States, and in the name of the people of the United States, manage the currency of the United States, and they would do that by basically creating currency. That's what those bank credits would be. So, unfortunately, our government's operating on the fallacy that it needs to borrow the money, Pete. That it has a need to not deficit spend, whereas they actually have the ability to deficit spend. And as a matter of fact, both the positions of the Chicago Plan for Monetary Reform and the American Monetary Institute's proposals um, are based on the fact that the money supply increases through what we conventionally call deficit spending, but what it really means is that the amount that's in the budget on the revenue side is deficient from the amount that's on the spending side, and the difference between those two is the increase in the money supply. So that's the mechanism that ought to be in place, Pete. Should be obvious that under that mechanism, the government would not need to borrow, would not need to raise the debt limit. Um, and that's the way that the system should be functioning. We should be first reducing and then eliminating the national debt, the debt of the taxpayers of the United States of America, as part of the public debt, because it's a kind of a correlation. There is kind of a correlation between the total public debt and our national debt. Um, so we have the ability to eliminate both of them, and we would not have this annual I call it kind of a dog and pony show between the Republicans and the Democrats about whether or not the government has the ability to actually carry out the mandate that it gets from the people to provide goods and services to the country, and we can eliminate that by basically reforming the monetary system, and that that's what we advocate. What really should happen, Pete, is the elimination of the growth of the debt. And you talked about that in your paper, Pete, about the fact that the national debt is the entire national debt of this country is only equivalent to the growth in the money supply over that period. So basically, if the government was in control of creating the money supply, the government would not need to increase the debt, the national debt, and it's just as plain and simple as that, Pete. And that's the place where we should be getting to, because there's no need to have that debt.
You referred to my paper on our website, which is called The Mother of All Free Lunches. The money supply in 1960 was about, I think it's about $250 billion. It was less than $1 trillion. Well, the money supply, if you measure it as M3, right now is about $15 trillion, although the Fed doesn't keep track of M3 anymore, so that's a bit of an estimate. But Shadow Stats, John Williams' website with alternative estimates of these numbers,
Right.
pegs us at about $15 trillion. Now that's remarkably close to the number that is our national debt, $12 trillion. So our money supply is directly related to the amount of debt that the government has. That's interesting. Wouldn't you want a money supply that's independent of the amount of debt that the government has? I mean, as we pointed out, if the government actually gets its house in order and starts balancing its budget, or even as it did during the Clinton years, start paying down the total national debt, the money supply crashes.
Right.
And the solution just seems so easy. If all that money, that $15 trillion had been created by the government as greenbacks like Lincoln did, there would be no national debt right now.
Yeah.
It's so astounding that people don't even hear it when you say it to them.
Right. Right. The thing, Pete, that I think that we want to keep in mind is this. Right now, the entire monetary system rests on the government debt. Okay, that's the foundation of the entire monetary system right now. The entire banking currency system of this country is based on their existence of government debt, treasury securities. So there has to be a total divorce between the growth of the money supply, which needs to happen and which can happen by government creation, and there being any national debt.
Joe, I want to hear your thoughts on Geithner's reassurances that he gave us on NPR the other night. Let's do that on another video.
Okay.